So now we're on to page 3, which is the start of the actual build of the engine. So far we've just been making components, and we're down to the nitty-gritty now. So stage 3 has got the 2 chassis members and all the stretchers to hold the chassis pieces apart. All 4 stretchers are different, so you should get them in the right place following the diagram. But before we start that, we've got to put these little brackets on, and as soon as they're on, they hand the chassis, so that you've got to get them the right side round. So there's more pre-assembly to do before we actually put the stretchers in. We've got to put the wheels on each side first on these little bronze bushes, and I've also put in this little bronze bush, which is part of the valve gear. So that one's already done, and I've already got these bushes fitted. So this one will have to go on this side. Make sure you get it all the right way round. So we've got both front chassis and back chassis there, and then we should be able to press down on the bush and just get it to go into its hole in the chassis. And the same again with this one. It's a bit fiddly, but once this is done we can get the stretchers in. Right, so now the wheels are all set and they shouldn't come out again. Make sure obviously you've got the front wheel towards the front of the chassis, that's with the short crank pin, and the back one has the longer crank pin and all the valve gear parts. So now we're ready to put the stretchers in, and that should hold this unit complete. And then we can fit the coupling rods. They go over the 2 crank pins like so. There's a little circlip to squeeze on the front. It won't actually go round nicely until both sets of rods are on. There we go. So the last part to do on this page 3 is these little valve gear parts. We've got an arm that goes through there, and there's another one to go on the top there, and then we've got to put the grub screws in all round. They're absolutely tiny, so you have to chase them about. The Allen keys are actually in the kit. There we are. And we've got one in the top here. That's that one. There's another one underneath, and then there are 2 on the eccentrics there to set the valve gear up. So now we're on to page 4. We've finished the chassis, that's now rolling, but we've got lots of bits to add on to it. We've got the foot plate to go on the back, and then the reversing handle goes on there. Get this the right way round because it's not got the same holes each side. And I'm going to bolt the cylinders onto this little cross plate here, and that then bolts onto the top of the chassis at the front, and then the valve arrangement goes on top of that. So that's what we're aiming to do in this stage. We'll show you a bit more as we get further along. So I've mounted up the cylinders on the chassis. The cylinders need to be assembled left and right hand. And now I'm fitting the valves. We've got 3 of those, 1 for each cylinder, and a reversing valve in the middle. And I've also just put the linkage in for the reversing lever. So this valve set goes right on the top, but before we do that, just make sure you have these gaskets the right way around. The steam ways are different lengths in the gaskets, so make sure they're actually the right way round. And then the top goes on with the countersunk stainless screws. So I'm just finally tightening up the screws on the steam chest. These are done with a little Phillips screwdriver, and we go around and tighten them down in order just to make sure they're nice and steam tight. I've also assembled the reverser, and I had to actually take the stand off, screw the reach rod into the stand, and then reassemble it and screw the valve out. You can see there's a little etched line on that valve. You adjust it, so in forward gear, that line is just lined up with the back of the block, and that should be mid-gear and that should be reverse. But we'll have to see how that pans out when we actually get into the steaming stage. Now this side has been fully assembled, so we've got the crosshead, the con rod and the valve rod all on, but this side still needs doing. So there's a little collar goes on to space out the con rod. Con rod itself has a tiny grub screw with the smallest Allen key, and that goes on to the valve rod like so, and there should be a little hole in the bottom of the piston rod that the grub screw goes into. And just pull it round, there it is. So there's the dimple in the piston rod that it needs to line up with, and then it pops on at the back end, and there's a circlip to go on it. With the valve rod, it's the same sort of style but a bit smaller, so it's quite tricky. There's a bit of paint in that hole there, which I've taken out on this side with a needle file. And then I've got two really tiddly E-clips to go on. There they are. One goes on the first groove, and then the other one, when it's in the engine, the other one goes on the second groove. You might just need to make sure this all goes together, cleaning any paint out as necessary. But once that's in, you can set the valve. Once again, it's got that little etched line on it, and when it's in its full in position, that line should be just about disappearing on the end of the steam chest there. So that gives you the valve movement. And then timing it correctly, it's set up by putting the crank pin on its back dead centre, and then this eccentric, you do one side at a time, this eccentric, the centre line of the eccentric is about halfway between the grub screws. So I'm setting that at 90 degrees, so this one's in a straight line, and the eccentric wants to come up 90 degrees. Tighten the two grub screws, and that's its setting. That's one side. Obviously deal with the other side separately, and that's an initial setting. We'll see how it actually runs. So we've got to the stage where we can test the chassis out on air. Now, braving the elements, we've come out to the garage and we're going to try puffing a little bit of air into the cylinder and just see what happens. That's going pretty well. That's forward. And then in mid-gear, it shouldn't move at all. No. And then put it into reverse and give it another puff. And the test really is slow running. Whereas it runs smoothly when it's at low revs. The valve timing is pretty good. And this all set up pretty much straight away, just on the mark, so I haven't had to fiddle with it. Try forward again. That should be a good smooth running locomotive. So now we're ready to stick the boiler on.